I'm Chad Ruthermond,
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
and welcome to NOCLIP Pocket. Plain water, pure knowledge. Today, we're going to be talking about Sayonara Wild Hearts, which was developed by Simogo and published by Annapurna Interactive. The game was released in September of 2019 on its initial run of platforms and then continued to release on other platforms until eventually I think the Xbox One was the last to get it in February of this year.
Yeah, it's on everything now.
Yeah, now no matter whatever you're listening to this podcast on, you can probably play this game on it. So Simoga is back on NoClip Pocket, which is exciting. We've previously described, or I at least have described them as a developer that seems like they can do no wrong by me. We've talked about Year Walk and Device 6, and I am gonna say that this game did not change my mind. It kicks ass.
Yeah, I was looking at their website, and they describe themselves as like not really even really being concerned if what they make is a game. Like they just try to do what they think is interesting, and I think that is an accurate description. Like they're one of those indie developers that I think really takes advantage of the medium. Like I think they're fortunate enough to have established a company that can make games like this.
Yeah. And they get, like, generally speaking, rewarded for it as well. Like, I think there's a magical something in the mobile game market that doesn't exist in the world of, like, major console releases and AAA games development, where you can release something super interesting that most people, if you then gave it to somebody who typically plays games on a console or on like a PC, they would be like, what is this? Like, this isn't the thing that I wanted, and I've not been this attuned to what those people are thinking since we started playing The Last of Us 2. But
Preview.
yeah. But it's something that's been swimming in my mind, and this game less so than the previous ones that we've played, but still falls outside of that like general realm of what people expect from games. And I think that the fact that the developer largely works on mobile platforms is sort of what allows that expectation to be there for them.
Yeah. And it seems like that's becoming less and less of a thing, too. Or it might just be that they don't really think about platform, and they just kind of like whatever the project is, they just work with whatever will work for the concept.
Mm.
But like I really like to see them make more and more ambitious things, because like the first thing we played by them was Year Walk, which is like a kind of like a point and click-esque thing, and then Device 6, which is more experimental, and now this, which is like a full 3D game. So like I like that there's been kind of an evolution, and I like am excited to see what they do next.
Yeah, evolution may not even be the term. I see what you're saying, because like this game, like visually, and I love the visuals of all of the games that they played. Device 6 obviously being the most like sort of bare bones, but there's like a format to it, you know, like it's laid out in a specific way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's visually arresting if you look at the game and expect to see a video game, and what you're presented with is like words and diagrams.
It's like a magazine layout.
Yeah. And it's cool to see that like step up and become more like vibrant and almost like ostentatious. This game is very in your face. And I don't know, I do love it, but it's at the same time they're striking out in totally different directions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to say that this like really built on what they did.
Yeah, it might just be a coincidence that they've gotten more complex visually over the past several games they've done.
And this was the first game that they did that I think, I'm not like a scholar on their like business side, but I believe this is the first game they did with a full-time publisher, with Annapurna, and weirdly also published Kentucky Route Zero, which we just talked
I'm going to
about.
say, I know I'd heard that name before.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I feel like this game's kind of hard to describe.
Yeah.
So the way that I kind of been thinking of it is kind of a melding between like a 3D Sonic game, a rhythm game, a couple of different kinds, like something like Audio Surf or even like Guitar Hero, with like the way like a track is kind of coming at you
Yeah.
or you're going along it. Um, but it doesn't really fall into a rhythm game so much. There's only a few parts in like each level where you have to hit a button to the beat. But yeah, I think there are a couple of 3D Sonic games that work kind of like this, where you're kind of like just switching between lanes and collecting rings.
And the fact that the camera angle shifts as well is like emblematic of those like Dreamcast era, like Sonic Adventure style 3D games.
So I think that's the best thing to compare it to, even though I think while playing it, it doesn't feel anything like a Sonic game.
No. I wanted to call it. So I ran, as I was playing through the game, part of what I was doing with my mental energy, because I'm an idiot, was trying to determine if I could come up with like a sensible genre title for what this game is, to use as a one-off joke on the podcast. And the first thing I thought of was Finite Runner. It's like an infinite runner, but one that has a very strict beginning and end.
I was also going to say Infinite Runner, but forgot.
Yeah, and then the other one that I came up with was Rhythmic Dodge 'em Up, which is... but then they added guns and ruined my quippy line about it. But I think we're getting across with this the idea of what it is you do in this game. It is a game that is mostly about forward motion, with a couple of exceptions, but anything that we say as a rule in this game is going to have an exception for the most part.
Yeah, and your acceleration is controlled for you, so it's more kind of about managing like positioning, if you want to say it that way, like where you are, like what lane you're in, and how you can like pick up all of the points that you can.
Yeah, I think even because the thing that made me sort of disconnect this from rhythm games generally, and in my mind what I'm thinking of is Frequency or its sequel Audacity, where you have these like prescribed tracks, is the first thing that I tried to do when the game booted up was jump between tracks on the like ethereal grid plane that they put you in by just pressing a button, but you actually have to like hold and accelerate your turning so that you go from lane to lane, and that is very different from that kind of game and changes the execution. Like it seems like such a small change, but the way that you play those two games is impossibly different.
Yeah, it's a lot more loose. Like you don't snap from lane to lane. You actually have more control. And I think it ends up like once you get used to it, playing through a level of this kind of feels like you've learned and rehearsed a part in a music video. Like once it all comes together, it makes you feel like you're a part of it in a way that like other rhythm games don't. I think there's like an element of performance almost to it.
Yeah. Because it isn't so rigid and there are choices to make. Like if you to do a song in a Guitar Hero game perfectly, you hit all of the notes in their prescribed locations at exactly the time that they're supposed to be. And in this game, the like optimal, I was thinking about this, like the optimal play for this game has got to be very engaging. This is like one of those successful things like a Star Fox game where you can, anyone can sort of play through the game, but if you want to go for high scores and you want to try and do the best, you have to like really work at it. And it has a lot of hidden depth in that. But that plays into that because there are paths you can choose to take, and once you get going, if you like die and reset, you're gonna probably take the same paths unless you're trying to optimize.
Right.
And so it gets that practiced feeling, like stuff like Celeste or Hotline Miami did.
Yeah, I was gonna compare it to like Devil May Cry, because you get those like style points too for like barely missing obstacles.
The near miss.
Yeah, like risky, I think is what it says.
Oh yeah, near miss is from Burnout, which is what I was thinking of, but is not really a very good comparison. But yeah,
Yeah, and those types of games, like platinum games, don't really engage me in that way. I think because they are relatively short games for the kinds of games they are, but like replaying a level over and over again is a significant time investment.
yeah,
And with these levels are short, and you also just kind of want to listen to the music some more because it's great. So it really incentivizes you to like go back and keep trying them to get better at them.
mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it just in a really organic way.
Yeah. It brings me to one of my two enumerated complaints that I have, and like with most of the games that we've talked about from Simogo, these are complaints that stem purely out of how much I loved the actual play of the game and just wanted slightly more out of it. Is that the levels are... It's the way that the game is designed and the way that you play through each level. When you take damage, it like whoop, 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 rewind and puts you back like at a checkpoint, which is usually just a few seconds prior to where you fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an element of flow to this, and the levels are so short already that I almost wish that the game just had like a health bar where you could take multiple hits, and then if you failed it, you went back to the beginning of the level. Because the iteration time wouldn't take... I mean, it would take a pretty huge hit percentage-wise, but it still wouldn't be a giant time investment. And the flow of this game is such that I just, like, I want to have the run, like the gold run.
Right.
From start to finish. Real bad. Like...
Yeah, I mean, you can do that manually.
Yeah, by just actively resetting.
Yeah.
But I think with the single hit thing, like you'd be more discouraged to do that if you took a death late in the level than you would be if you just like played through and then like you took the death because you ran out of health. Like it feels like more of a struggle that way.
Yeah, I suppose.
But then there's that fucking snapping, clapping level.
Oh, yeah.
Parallel universes. That was fucking so... Like, that took me way longer than it should have to figure out. It was the only time in the game that I got accosted by the magician who would let you skip parts of the game if you chose. And I was like, don't ever talk to me again, magician.
Yeah.
But, the eventual solution was more or less just to constantly move all the way to the left, then back to the right. But it took me long enough to figure out how the mechanic worked that that would have destroyed me if I had to restart every time.
Yeah, that one was tricky to figure out, but like I went back and got gold ranks in like all like the first third of the levels, which includes that one. And like once you see it enough, it's really not that bad. Yeah, like, it's just really the shift. They do like subtle shifts in gameplay throughout, and that's the most like jarring one by far.
I don't know, the shoot 'em up segment.
Yeah,
in the VR headset, it was a pretty dramatic shift.
Yeah, but like it's smooth. It's a smooth transition though. Like it's something that at least us who play lots of games, can transition into pretty easily. I think, or at least fair. I could. That one, the one like the thumping psychedelic wave thing of the parallel worlds level was just like, oh god. Yeah. Like when you first start it.
Yeah, it's really disorienting, like from on first blush.
Yeah.
But then as you go through it, you start to like it took me, I was probably like a checkpoint or two in before I realized that that it was changing between two set things, but fortunately had already made that realization by the time it started to do three. So you kind of like get to learn the bits and pieces of it, but we shouldn't talk about just that one like 1 minute 30 second section of this game. But it is like that is like the peak difficulty up until like the actual boss of the game.
Right.
But yeah, that was my one thing. I feel like I wanted the game to give me the like more focused like flow based experience, but I think their target audience, which is every living soul on the planet, I think most people are not as like accustomed to that rhythm game like jive, and probably would be less amicable to it.
Yeah, I think it's designed with the first time experience in mind, because like it really feels like the game wants you to play through it all the way through in one sitting, like you're sitting down to listen to an album.
Yeah.
So I think it's designed that way on purpose, and I think the experience that you're looking for is kind of like, sounds to me like the going for the high scores afterwards mode, whereas like as soon as you like die, you're like start up A.
Yeah.
You know, like that like muscle memory thing.
Well, you know the like my most of the time when we play a game, either for the Banks podcast or this podcast, and we finish the game and I feel like I have like internalized it and I'm ready to talk about it, I will uninstall the game.
Right.
Did not uninstall this game because I fully intend to go back and like run a couple of levels.
Yeah. I wanted to compare it to a book where it's like you don't want to put this down once you start playing it.
Right. Actually, we can go from there into my one other thing, and I'm actually more curious as to like how you feel about this. The game has 23 levels, I think.
Something around there.
Yeah, they aren't numbered, but I read it recently and now I don't remember. But it's a huge number of levels.
Yeah, I think they're in sets of 4 or 5.
Yeah,
I don't remember.
Sense. Yeah, because there's 5 individual like chapters.
Yeah,
and then the final boss. So, I thought that the levels themselves were individually pretty well paced, but then there were a couple that felt like they were just too short and probably could have been mashed into another one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand they wanted to separate them by like track, but I bet that you could have transitioned between them without breaking the flow as much as going to the screen, like the result screen, and then going to the next level.
Yeah, I think they wrote the whole soundtrack before they started designing the levels, because they wanted the levels to be like designed around the songs.
Yeah.
So I would assume it's governed by that.
That could make sense, yeah.
But no, I think you bring up an interesting point. It would be sweet to have a mode where you could just link every single song together back to back and play through the whole thing without stopping.
Did you open the album play mode after you unlocked it?
No. Is that what that is?
I don't know, because I didn't either.
I assumed that was just like a listen to the soundtrack thing.
No, I think you actually can jump into individual levels and play them differently. But I don't know if it'll run them together. A lot of them, because I booted it up at one point and it started with the opening cutscene, and that's when I quit. I was like, all right, I'll come back. This is obviously just the game. Like, I didn't know if it was going to have something else added to it. And I didn't want to just play the game through all the way again just for fun immediately after finishing it the first time. But yeah, it would be very cool, and maybe that's what that provides. In which case, sweet.
Yeah, what's the snowboard game?
Snowboard Kids 2?
1080
snowboarding.
The one where it's broken up into levels, but then you can link them all together. It's all just one mountain, and you can play
steep.
Okay, yeah.
Or SSX 3 kind of, but me and most other SSX fans take umbrage with SSX 3.
Anyway, yeah, it just seems like it would be cool if you could do that with this.
Yeah, I do agree. And also, I like the brevity of the levels because you can go back and replay things, like if you get like a wild hair up your ass and just feel like doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So It's a give and take. It was really only in like 3 or 4 situations where I felt like really fucking jiving and was like, don't make me press a button 3 times before I get into this. Because it just sucked me out of the moment a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, that's like because of how good the game actually is.
Yeah.
So I wanted to jump back to something that you mentioned before.
Uh-huh.
Which was that the soundtrack is great. And I want to also mention that this is one of the rare instances where I can say that this game slaps. Like, not just the soundtrack, because everything is built so strongly over it.
The soundtrack is the game.
The soundtrack is the game. If you die in the game, you die
in real
life. And in the soundtrack, which is the game. And, it's just, I don't know, it's just very bumpin', and they use the, like, natural, like, lows and highs in the gameplay to really sort of, like, bring that feeling home and give you that, like, I don't know, like, that ASMR, like, tingly feeling of, like, shit just nailing it. Just over a million different times in the game.
Yeah, there were parts of it that almost kind of reminded me of the Celeste soundtrack, like some of the instrumentation, like the keyboard sound effects and things. But if you just made that like a synth pop song.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like the mix of the music with like the jewel tone colors. Yeah, it has like this almost kind of like pseudo 80s inspired aesthetic, but like it does its own thing with it.
Yeah. It's sort of like
a little bit album art inspired, you know?
Yeah, when you start to, like, break down, like, aesthetic influences, like, obviously you have this, weirdly, the same shit that inspired the, like, jewel tone vaporwave aesthetic of games that we've already talked about, like Hyper Light Drifter and Kentucky Route Zero.
Severed,
yeah. Severed, I feel like, draws from a different inspiration,
True,
but ends up with the same color palette.
Well, and also, I think a lot of the geometric shapes, like the way the characters are designed, there's a lot of similarities.
That's true, yeah. Like, a lot of that sort of bleeds together, and, like, they're pulling from similar things, and it's just sort of what each of them does with it. And the VR headset level is actually the one that sort of, like, drove it all home for me, because they were able to render it down into like the very basic component parts of it, and it still maintained that same, like, it lost a little bit of the energy, but it did maintain the same feeling, and yeah, it just kicks ass all the way through.
Yeah, it made me think a little bit of Nier
Automata.
Yeah, how it did like the perspective shifting, and it never felt like it skipped a beat.
Yeah.
It's not quite on the same level or quite the same thing, but it's able to transition you from all the different camera angles and yeah, down to that top-down VR headset, and also a brilliant touch that it actually takes place like in the headset.
Right.
It's hard for me to describe this in sound form, listener, but I'm sure you can find a Google image of it.
Right.
But yeah, I just that comparison came to my mind. I thought that was really well handled.
Yeah, the fact that it does, because it keeps it in the headset. I'm trying to like also describe this with words, but
if
like,
you think you're looking straight on at a VR headset, like the outside of the goggles,
right?
That becomes like a little screen on your screen that all the action is taking place inside of.
And they also keep the character, the hermit's face, there as like an anchor point at certain periods where like it will rotate, and you'll also see their head rotating as well, which is very neat and cool. I will say that in that segment, the first time when you get the like timed like bullets in the bullet hell part, where they use the snakes and shit, when the music starts to like starts down tempoing and like losing some of its like vigor, and then the bullets explode out and like it picks back up, like that blew my socks off and my pants off, and I was just sitting nude in a computer chair, just utterly dumbfounded by how well it tied it together. So just super good use of aesthetic in this game.
I also like that at the end of the level before that boss that is like the astrological sign of
Right.
the VR levels turns the character into a Game Boy cartridge and then slots it into the VR headset.
Yes.
Very cool.
God. That is like the one word thesis of this game. Like, I feel like they were like, all right, so we just made these other games, but like, let's make one that's cool.
Let's make one that kicks ass.
Yeah. Like, it's everything that like a longer version of this game would fuck up and fail to do correctly. And like, because it is so short and the individual levels are so short, there isn't a point where it stops being cool. And if you think for one split second that it might not be cool anymore, they do a totally different thing, and now you're sword fighting on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Like, they just keep changing everything to make it interesting and like continue to like, so that you don't ever fall into like I was gonna say a rhythm. That's what they want you to do, but you don't fall into it. It never becomes like
your expectations never fall into a rhythm.
There it is. Yeah, you don't know what you're gonna get into on each one.
It's like a box of chocolates.
It's exactly yes. This is the Forrest Gump of games. Figure that one out. On the soundtrack itself, this is not my specialty. Like talking about pop music, I don't know.
It's even less my specialty.
Yeah, like I don't know how to describe it. I don't know what comparisons to make or to describe how good it is. But anecdotally, when I booted the game, I didn't want to leave the start menu for a while. Because it just immediately starts with fucking lyrics. Like, the first thing that you hear is a song that has lyrics in it. And it's cool. Like, it just sounds real good. It's like you just put on the first track, and it doesn't really let up with that. I was almost disappointed because the first stage uses like a remix of a classical song.
Oh, I thought that was pretty cool.
It was cool, but I was afraid that it wasn't going to eventually go back to the electropop, which is so like unique in this not this genre, as we found we can't even really describe that.
Yeah, I would think I would describe it as like this is also not my expertise, but like there's like newer music that takes a lot of cues from like 80s new wave stuff and like synth pop and things like that. Like there's this band like stuff like Neon Trees, and like there's a band called Bleachers and things like that. It's not exactly the same thing, but I think it's kind of pulling from similar influences. That's like the closest touchstone I have.
The influence that I saw mentioned, this is just on the Wikipedia page, so I didn't do any deep research on this. They mentioned Sia, and they mentioned Churches, and I don't really know anything about Sia, but I've heard songs by Churches, at least partially because they did songs on the Death Stranding soundtrack, and they seem so much more fucking morose than this game is. And I don't necessarily know that even if I think they could have taken inspiration, I don't really know their whole catalog, but it feels like it's very energetic without being like party music.
Right. Good use of Queen Latifah.
Yeah.
As the narrator.
It was so her performance was super over the top, but like in a way that was like exceedingly appropriate.
Oh yeah, it's like the director told her to do that. Like it's exactly what you want. It kind of reminds me, and I wish I could think of the exact comparison I'm drawing in my mind, but like I think like old Sega games that have like bit crunched voices in them, like the Sega startup screen, like the Sega. There's like an appeal to that. Like when like on the menu, I think she says something like when you start up the game.
Yeah.
I don't remember, but like I always really like that stuff, and I feel like Sega bass fishing also had something like that, like on the start screen, like you'd hit the start button and then like a guy would say something.
Yeah, this was like really big in the like the Dreamcast PS1 like
and
disc-based systems.
I loved that.
Oh yeah.
And I think this uses that sort of thing to great effect. Like the boss fights are one thing I want to talk about that we haven't yet. Whenever you mash the button to like punch them real good at the end,
Yeah.
and like if you like do a lot of them, she'll be like, "Ooh, that's gotta hurt" or something
Yeah,
like
it's,
that.
Perfect.
And you're like, "Fuck yeah!" Like it just makes it feel extra good.
Yeah, it's an excellent job by Queen Latifah. The thing that I was gonna bring up was that if you imagine how much we make fun of the Resident Evil guy who's like in every Resident Evil game.
Resident.
Yeah, I love that guy. Super good. The reason that it comes up so much is not because it's so laughably bad, even though it is like kind of campy.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it is memorable. It's a thing that like it introduces you to the game and sort of like lets you like get your expectations. And I think that she fills a similar role here.
It works really well for games that are arcadey. Yes. I think.
Oh yeah, like
and even Resident Evil has like the older ones have kind of that Capcom arcadey influence to them.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the newer ones probably not newest. The middle era are the most arcadey of them, but yeah, it is. Yeah, I don't know. It's very good, and I'm really glad that it's included because it seems so insane. Not just because it's Queen Latifah, but because like the game doesn't seem like the kind that would have that kind of like narration, and the fact that she just continues to provide also the like shouts and stuff, which is really good.
Yep, like it offers like a little framing device kind of a thing, and I like that there's like a shoestring little narrative.
Yeah, it basically is like plot beginning and then the whole events of the game, and then next beat is the end of the game.
Yeah, it ties it all together,
It's why it's a shoestring narrative.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it ties, yeah. Let's talk about those bosses, though.
I didn't have too much else to say about them. They ended up comprising a surprising amount of the tracks, I thought. And I liked it as it went on, how it became, like, differences in, like, subtle, like, I don't want to say genre necessarily, but you have, like, the part with the wolves. There's, like, a shooty Galaga-style thing. Then the VR stuff that's, like, a shoot-'em-up, etc. The one where you have the bow and arrow, etc., etc. That's kind of like Sin and Punishment or whatever that game is, like a light gun game.
Yeah.
So there's
that was the one that I was like, I wish I was playing this on something with a touchscreen.
Yeah.
Using the WASD keys to like move around.
Oh, you didn't play with a controller?
No. It was hard
to
do.
Weird. I hadn't even like considered. But yeah, I guess if you played it on PC. Anyway, I lost my train of thought.
You're just going through the bosses. Like the last one after that is the devil. Or
yeah,
not the devil,
the
but,
Grim Reaper.
Yeah, Death. Little Death, as they call him.
Yeah. With his weird blonde haircut.
Yeah, and his feels more like a bullet hell in like not purely because it isn't like quite as much of a bombardment, but they use similar like mechanics, like the swiping and shit, where you just have to go to quadrants of the screen. But yeah, it's similar, kind of. Definitely difference in genre. I think that was the correct way of describing it.
Yeah, and yeah, I just like in that they put the like the rhythm, quick time events or whatever you want to call them, the little rhythm bits. They kind of tied those with the boss fights as it went on, so it gave that like a cohesion that I liked. So well implemented.
Yeah, and I think most of them were successful as both like boss encounters in the traditional sense and also extensions of the like Infinite Runner style levels.
Yeah, I think my favorite level in the game is the first boss fight where you had to chase all three of the motorcycle guys. I think it feels like the longest level. It might not be as long as some of the later ones.
Yeah, it's got to be close, if
Yeah.
not the longest.
But yeah, that one stands out the most in my mind.
Yeah, that one, the wolf boss, I thought was great. The fact that it was like a big fucking 3-headed wolf that was like shooting Donkey Kong barrels down the tracks at
Right.
you, and yeah,
It made me think of a gummy ship boss from Kingdom Hearts 2, almost.
that's fair. I mean, I don't know which one, but I can
There's
imagine.
one that operates a lot like this,
Mhm.
or that, where like it shoots things down at you, and you're looking at it from like a different perspective.
Yeah. No, I don't necessarily know that I have like too much more to say on the bosses. The thing that is cool about the bosses is how well they are integrated into the main gameplay, and also all of their tracks are really good. I do want to talk about how you punch Lil Death a bunch of times, and then you ride on a trail of vomit or something.
Oh yeah,
That was fucking weird.
yeah, sure was.
Yeah.
And also it was weird mechanically because you had to like spin the screen.
Yeah, you had to go around the cylinder that it was creating.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a thing, because I definitely hit that first obstacle head the fuck on, because I assumed that I would like jump it or something. That's not the case.
Yep. You just ride the astral trail of vomit. I really like after that though that you go back through all the bosses and then you kiss them to change them into like good people. I don't know, like
Less wild hearts
to purify them. You have to
Yeah.
tame their wild hearts
with a cool island song.
with a fresh island song. This soundtrack contains a lot of fresh island songs.
Yeah, that's the main genre, I would say.
Yeah, but it reminded me once again a little bit of Celeste, where the final boss with Battle-In, you're just chasing her and trying to hug her.
Right. Except because the first one comes out of nowhere, like you don't expect it, and then as you go through further and further, it is just kind of like a feels good kind of thing.
It's a victory lap.
Yeah, but it was still interesting, and the medley track was equally as badass as the previous tracks that it is composed of, and it's good to revisit it, especially like with how short everything is. Getting like a what do they call that in a reprise? Like on an album, yeah, of each boss as you get to replay them. And then there's not the first game that I've played in the last year where you end up just riding on a dragon at the end.
Yeah,
it's kind of weird how frequently this seems to come up. I don't know if we've talked about any of those games on the podcast, but like in Dreams, like actual story mode that comes packaged with the game, you also end up on a dragon. And I don't remember if I can provide a second example, but I know for a fact that it happens again. But yeah, then you do that as the end narration goes over. I don't know, pretty good.
Yeah,
Liked it. Do we have
wild thoughts?
I should just let you take over the final thoughts announcement, because I've never once come up with a single good one. And I do in fact have wild thoughts. I was a big fan of this game. I liked the aesthetic qualities of it. I immediately downloaded the soundtrack and am going to be looking for a vinyl version of it at some point in the future. It is intensely cool in a way that I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what this game was when I started playing it. I just didn't look anything up about it. I had just heard people mention it and knew the developer, so I wanted to do it anyway. Playing through it was cool and was a good experience. I think that at about an hour and a half, this game is probably too short for most people given the price point, but similar to what we said about Super Hot, I think that if you're somebody who's willing to dive into the extra content of the game, we didn't mention the Zodiac riddles. They're very complicated from my understanding, and I don't know that you get anything for solving them. But it is something. Like, it definitely can sink a lot of time.
Yeah, they all seemed like challenges that wouldn't be any fun to me personally, but I only looked at the first handful, so I can't speak to all of them.
Yeah. And I think part of the appeal of it is like solving them as opposed to just doing them, which was not my experience, because I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't know how to begin to interpret this, and Googled what is it and saw the solutions for the first few. And I was like, well, that's got to be at least most of the fun gone, right? So I was not able to do that, but I can imagine somebody being able to sink their teeth into it. But beyond that, love this game. Thought it kicked a lot of ass, and do recommend. Yeah. Which is not something we do, but here we are.
Yeah, this game fucking rules. The end. No, I saw a number of people talk about this on the internet, and from what I saw of it, I thought it looked pretty sweet, and I ended up liking it even more than I expected to. There's just a lot of appeal here. It almost kind of harkens back to like DDR and like older, more abstract rhythm games, where it has like these kind of like cool, trippy, like interesting visuals to go along with like a unique synth poppy soundtrack, and it's a really cohesive, cool experience. And we've talked about Simogo as a developer before, and it has all of their hallmarks as well. So this one just, they knocked it out of the park, I think, and it's probably their most accessible game, or their most appealing to like a wide audience, I would think. So yeah, this is something I would probably recommend to anybody. It's really cool, and it melted my icy heart with a Hot Island song.
I gotta say that, like, if Year Walk is probably still my favorite game by them,
it's hard. They're also different.
They are very different, but like Year Walk feels like a game that was like tailor made for me to love specifically.
It was our first love.
This game does feel like it is more of a general audience's kind of thing. Also, because I didn't mention it all, there's a game called Thumper that this actually reminds me of, in terms of like, not purely on its aesthetic value, but the fact that it does use these like sort of abstract, surreal landscapes. That's just like the hard version of this game. So if you like played this game and were like, that was sick, I want to play more rhythm games where you're on a track and you perform actions, Thumper is like the extreme version of this. So I recommend that. Thank you for listening to NOCLIP Pocket this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're talking about... the pronunciation of this is literally going to destroy me.
Dujana?
Which I know very little about. It is similarly abstract, but now in all of the ways, except just instead of just aesthetically.
Yeah, like when you think of like art house indie game, this sort of thing probably comes to mind. I think it has an extra like eye-catching appeal to me because it looks like it was cobbled together with like stuff someone had around the house. Like there's a lot of like textures and things taken from like real stuff, like photos and crayon, and I don't know, it almost kind of looks like a diorama as a game. It looks really unique, so look forward to exploring that.
Yes, and everything that entails next time. Until then, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com. You can find links to all of our socials, the Discord server where we talk about these games with you, the people, as well as links to all of our old episodes. Man, we did like a weird episode a long time ago about both Guitar Hero and Rock Band, which as an older episode has worse audio quality, but I think is still pretty good and has a bitchin' title.
Yeah, it's from the era, like the older era, that is still listenable, I think.
Yeah. In the before times.
In the long, long ago.
And that is all. Think there's water in this bottle? You're wrong.
You're such a fraud, Chad.
I had this like thought in my head just now to just say slurp it till it's flat, and then my whole fucking world exploded.